Hi there, I'm Harrison, and I serve as the tech team lead here at Redemption. We are a diverse community in the heart of Houston seeking to lead Jesus-centered lives, and we're convinced that there is a seat for everyone at the table of God. Redemption relies on the generosity of our community, and this includes you, to share resources like this one. If you would like to contribute, visit redemptionhou.com/give. The sermon that follows is from the third Sunday in Easter. The season in the church calendar known as Eastertide is steeped in the ultimate hope for the future that has already begun breaking into the present. As we prepare to hear a reading from John's Gospel, followed by this week's sermon, we begin with a moment of stillness.
After these things, Jesus manifested himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and he manifested himself in this way. Simon Peter and Thomas, called Didymus, and Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We will also come with you." They went out and got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. But when the day was now breaking, Jesus stood on the beach, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. So Jesus said to them, "Children, you do not have any fish, do you?" They answered him, "No." And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you will find a catch." So they cast, and then they were not able to haul it in because of the great number of fish. Therefore the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." So when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put his outer garment on, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. But the other disciple came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards away, dragging the net full of fish. So when they got out of the land, they saw a charcoal fire already laid and fish placed on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish which you have now caught." Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land, full of large fish, 153, and although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples ventured to question him, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Lord. And Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and the fish likewise. This is now the third time that Jesus was manifested to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. So when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my lambs." He said to him again a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Shepherd my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he had said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you'll stretch out your hands and someone else will gird you and bring you where you do not wish to go. Now this, he said, signifying by what kind of death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, "Follow me." So this was not planned, but this morning as we did our normal Easter kind of ritualistic prayer, my daughter came up and unintentionally joined us, which was great because my intro was talking about how my daughter has been singing what's called the Troparion, I believe is how you pronounce this, but it's an ancient Easter hymn that's sung in the Greek Orthodox Church. And so I know nothing about it. I'm just we're just driving down 59 and all of a sudden my daughter starts singing, "Christ is risen from the dead." I'm not going to sing it, okay? Y'all calm down. All right. But Christ is risen from the dead. And then she doesn't really know what these words mean. So she kind of makes them up. They sound sort of similar. But trampling down death by death and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. And she sings it in this bubbly Barney kind of way. It's adorable. It's sweet. It's the cutest thing you've ever seen. But we've been using like a similar ancient Eastern confession the last several years. If you've been around for the last 3 or 4 years, at Easter, we say this thing that I said at the beginning of the service. As my daughter ran up and gave me a hug. The world below lies desolate. The spirits of evil are fallen. The angels of God are rejoicing. And the tombs of the dead are empty. Christ is risen. And I wonder, as we've said these words together, if you're kind of like in the back of your head, be like, why am I saying this? What does this mean? Particularly the lines in both what my daughter's saying and in the words that we confess together. Upon those in the tombs bestowing life, and the tombs of the dead are empty. Like, are they? I don't know. I can go to my grandfather's grave right now, and I'm pretty sure it's not empty. I'm pretty sure there's a body there. And so what is it that these ancient Easter confessions are trying to get in us? What is it they're trying to share with us? What is it that they're trying to get us to imagine about the world in which Christ is actually risen from the dead? Right? Because if what they're trying to convince us of is that there are no dead people, we can like go and be like, no, right there. That's a dead body. You guys want to see a dead body? There will be a day, the church has confessed, for 2025-ish years, where Christ will actually raise the dead, where those tombs will actually be empty. But these Easter confessions are not really about that. They're about something else. They're about somehow this thing that Jesus has done, this resurrection being spilled out into the world here and now. And so throughout this whole series, what I want to remind us of over and over and over again is that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is not something that we're putting in our pockets for that day that we die. That the resurrection of Jesus Christ matters to us right here and right now. It matters to our world right here and right now. And so every Easter Sunday for the next 3 weeks, we will confess Christ is risen, Christ is risen. You'd be like, oh my gosh, yes, I get it. He's risen, okay? But I can't help but come back to these words, and we are asking the question, what does a resurrected Jesus mean for us today? Because I think for most of us, if I were to give you a pop quiz hotshot, the 3 of y'all that are chuckling have now dated yourselves. I know how old you are, and we all went to Blockbuster and rented that movie. That's great. But what does resurrection mean for us today? If I was to give you a pop quiz, you would probably say something about like, I don't really know, or like it was this great thing that means that one day when I die, it'll be okay somehow. But like, what does it mean for you right now? Well, I have the hope of something tomorrow, maybe. And so today I want us to continue exploring this question because I can't help but imagine in this final chapter of John that focuses on Peter, which is such a strange and odd thing. It's this series of stories where Peter is kind of this focal point, that Peter is asking this same question to himself at the beginning of chapter 21. Right? He's seen the risen Jesus multiple times now, twice, right? There was the whole interlude where like Thomas wasn't there, and so Jesus shows up and is like, hey, here I am, and people are like, whoa, Jesus is risen. And then like, but Thomas wasn't there, so he comes back later, and then Thomas sees him, and then everyone's like, whoa, again, Jesus is really actually risen. And so then they're sitting around, and Peter's like, I don't know, let's go fishing. And I can't help but wonder if what Peter is doing here is he is trying to go about his life as if resurrection hasn't actually happened. Right? So Peter was a fisherman, and then Jesus showed up to Peter and said, hey, Peter, come and follow me. And then everything changed for Peter. And then Jesus died, and then Jesus came back to life, and now Peter seems to be going back to the fishing thing. He seems to be wanting to return to a normal life. He seems to be wanting to go back to the office, just like he always did. And there's so much here for us to reflect on as followers of Jesus, as we so often are trying to figure out, wait, what does this whole Jesus being risen thing actually really do for me? And I think if we're like really brutally honest with ourselves, a lot of times I get the privilege of having like a vocation and a job where it's like, I get to say I'm a pastor, so my answer to this is easy, but it's actually not so easy. But like, would my life be different if I believed in Jesus or not? Would I still be an accountant? Would I still be a lawyer? Would I still be a business owner? Would I still be doing the things that I do? Would I still drive in traffic the way that I drive in traffic? For me, the answer is most certainly yes. Would I still treat my neighbor the way that I treat like what substantively would be different about my life if I didn't believe in Jesus? I think this is kind of where Peter is. He's like, this was like this cool little 3-year interlude, but does any of this really actually matter other than just like, well, when I die, I know things are good? So much that just feels like our normal life, which so many of us are trying desperately to get out of, by the way. We don't quite know what it means that the risen Jesus is involved in that part of our life. That Jesus is meeting us at the water cooler and in the traffic and in our sleeping and in our eating our breakfast and in our raising our kids or yelling at our kids or doing all the things that we normally do in a day in and day out life. And the thing that I want to remind us about resurrection is that resurrection is not your job. If it is, please, let's talk, because I've got a lucrative business idea for you. We miss this, right? And this is so painfully obvious, and yet I need to put it right in front of us. Resurrection is not your job. It's God's job. And notice that in this story, in the story that we inherit, that the disciples are taking, because they're good Jewish people, it is Saturday, they are taking the Sabbath. They are unable to work. And they are unable to go and do the thing that matters most to them, the priority that they have in their life at this moment on that Saturday after Jesus has died is to get to his body and prepare it for a proper Jewish burial, but they can't. They do the only thing they're allowed to do on the Sabbath, which is rest. And it's on that day, in that rest, as dawn breaks the Sabbath, God has done his work of changing everything. God doesn't need your furious, exhausting, throwing yourself into the work of God in the world. God worked for them and for the world in their rest, in their limitation, in their lack, in their grief. God showed up at dawn and resurrected. This means that resurrection is not in our hands, and it's not something that we muster up. It's not like, man, God's really trying to save the world if the church would just get its act together. That's not how this works. Resurrection is working in the life of Peter, even as he tries to go back, to go fishing. Some of you are like, cool, so I can go fishing now. Yes, please, go with God and go fishing. But what Peter misses here is what he's going to find out really soon is there's no real ever going back. Right? So many of us have kind of experienced this with the pandemic. There was all this talk during the pandemic of life will never go back, or we're trying to get back to the new normal. And we're kind of trying still, I don't know, maybe we're there. And someone this morning was sharing how they're yeah, I got COVID. I'm yeah, what is this? 2020? Come on, get with it. But the risen Christ shows up smack dab in the middle of Peter's real, actual life. The risen Jesus shows up on the shores of his going back, his fishing. And he offers real fish and real wine and real meaning and a real and new vocation for this person who is a hot mess. And then Christ shows up and gives Peter reconciliation and asks Peter, do you love me? Right, we see this in verse 14. This was now the third time that Jesus revealed himself to the disciples after he was risen from the dead. And now when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? I love that he speaks Peter's language, the ever-competitive, who's the greatest in your kingdom? He meets Peter in his shame and his disgrace. He's like, hey, you still love me more than everybody else? Mister, I'm going to chop everyone's head off for you. I'm going to die for you. Remember that, Peter? 72 hours ago. I don't know when that was. He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said, tend my lambs. And he said to him again a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he says to him, shepherd my sheep. And then he says to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. And so in this moment, right, there is the symbolism of Peter's 3 denials being reconciled by Jesus' 3 questions. But what's rich here, what's a little bit deeper, if we can Bible nerd out for just 2 seconds, is the Hebrew symbolism of 3 is not an accident. I don't think Peter denies Jesus 3 times because that just was what Peter did historically. Although, yeah, sure, I think that is what Peter did historically, but I think there's something even more powerful, more unfortunate in the 3 denials. So in the Hebrew mind, to do something 3 times is fullness, it's completion, it's perfection. So Peter doesn't just like have a slip up. He has fully and completely and perfectly and utterly denied Jesus. And now Jesus meets him and fully and completely and utterly 3 times restores him. That his reconciliation meets Peter's shame, Peter's denial, Peter's best attempt at not loving Jesus. 3 do you love me's, complete reconciliation and restoral in the face of complete and utter denial. And Jesus shows up and offers Peter this peace. And he points him and he points us towards the question that probably matters the most. Right, so I know at Redemption, we talk a lot about, hey, look, God loves you. And we mean that. That's not trite. We try to do a really good job of not making that trite. We try to do a really good job of explaining so many of our problems in life are our inability to actually really believe that God actually loves us. But one of the questions that Jesus asked, that's a pretty important one for us as we're following Jesus, is, do you love me? We get that God loves us, but God now turns to us and looks us in the eyes and says, do you love me? Because you can do a lot of following Jesus without any love of Jesus. You can know a lot of things about Jesus without any love for Jesus. We've watched the church do lots of things in the name of Jesus that probably lack the love of Jesus. We are quick to jump to belief, to knowledge, to serving. But love? Surely God wants something else from us, right? He wants us to do something, to know something, to be something other than what we are. God forbid we actually look in the mirror and see what that actually is. But Jesus simply says, do you love me? And we see in this encounter the reconciliation of Jesus overcoming Peter's refusal to love. And in this story, we see in our good days and our bad days, in the days where we fully love Jesus with everything we have, and on those days where we're like, oh yeah, Jesus, forgot about him today. And that Jesus meets us with the question and the reconciliation and the restoration, and then says, now go and care for my people, my church. So then, what must this moment have been like? I want to take a minute. You're Peter, or maybe one of the other ones. And you've this weird thing has just happened. It's like the story that ends where it begins. Like we were fishing and we couldn't catch anything. He says, cast the net. And then all of a sudden we do. And now he's saying, follow me. It's all very similar. And you're sitting on the beach and you're like, man, we've been through a lot. Lots gone on. But what joy must you have had? Lots of confusion, plenty of questions. But the expectation, the joy, the feeling of we have made it. We've arrived. This is it. It had to have been there, right? But then immediately, Jesus prepares Peter for what actually lies ahead versus what he thinks lies ahead or expects perhaps lies ahead. I wonder if when we think of a life of resurrection, I wonder if we often misunderstand the nature of resurrection in such a way that we think resurrection is just some sort of resuscitation. That you get to kind of keep your life and your plans and your dreams and your hopes, and Jesus just kind of sprinkles a little God dust on top of it. Little what is this guy? He does the thing with the salt. Yeah. He's boo! And then you're cool. I've just attached Jesus to my life, and now everything's going to be great. I got blessings on blessings on blessings. And I wonder if we think that a resurrection life is an improved life. It's I don't know, we installed a pool, or we upgraded our car. We're in the LX version now. I wonder if we think that this is some sort of a metaphor for we've got a lucky charm in our pocket now because we're following Jesus. that all of the things I wanted in life are now going to happen. I can't tell you how often. I was a high school teacher for years in a Christian school, and I taught theology to 18-year-olds. It was a blast, y'all. But so often the thing I had to deal with over and over and over again was this idea that I need to do this for God so that God will do this for me sort of thinking. And so often they would say things like, yeah, I really had to do my Bible study this morning because I got a test today. I'm like, I don't think this is how this works. I don't think you get an A on your test. Maybe you should have been studying something besides the Bible for your test. I don't know. Or I don't know, people that are wanting to have a successful football career. They want to get to a certain college and get a scholarship and then go into the NFL draft. Well, I really got to go to church because that way I'll have God's favor. And we think of this in some sort of way of resurrection means God's going to somehow give us a little zhuzh in our life. But resurrection is what happens at graves. Resurrection is something that happens to corpses. And that was my son giggling at the word graves. Yeah. That totally checks out. Yeah. So Karl Barth, who is an old white theologian guy, he's brilliant and was a great theologian, but he borrows from Friedrich Nietzsche here. And he says what Nietzsche says, which is, only where graves are is there resurrection. And so we embody this in baptism. When we come to the waters of baptism, what we're doing, whether you know it or not, is you are leaving your old life behind. And Barth has this whole idea of look, you got to dunk people only for this reason. And he says this, and I love it so much. There has to be a real actual threat that you could actually die. If you just get held under and they don't pull you back up, he says that the people that are watching that don't know what's happening should think, wow, they're drowning that guy. Because this is exactly the image. You are dying with Christ. That your old self, the old patterns, the old ways, the old ambitions, the old dreams, the old goals, all of that is gone. And then we're raised up in resurrection. New life, new creation. Not zhuzzed up life, not blessed life, not augmented life, completely new life. And this is where things take a little bit of a turn because we don't really want this, right? If we're being honest, I know we're supposed to want it. Yeah, it's cool, sign me up, cool. You've said the right answer. Jesus is proud of you. Congratulations. But listen to what he says to Peter. Verse 18, truly, truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to put on your belt and walk wherever you wanted. When you were younger, you got to do what you want. Your life you were the captain of your destiny. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will put a belt on you and bring you where you do not want to go. And we know in the life of Peter that this happens to be a pretty excruciating end where he's crucified upside down. But then he says this. Now, he says this indicating by what kind of death Peter would glorify God. And it's in Peter's going where he doesn't want to go, doesn't expect to go, doesn't think this isn't my definition of a good life. This isn't how I would write my story. It's in that where he glorifies God. And so I wonder right now, in this moment, in your life, if you find nooks and crannies of what I would call death. Maybe not real death, maybe not actual death, maybe so. But places in your life where you're this is just not going the way that it's supposed to go. This is not going the way that I would have written it. This is not the thing. This is not the blessed life. I'm not putting this on Instagram. But life in light of a risen Jesus is never some kind of add-on to the life we had before because only the dead can be resurrected. Eugene Peterson, who is... he's the one who translated The Message. He's written lots of books. He was a pastor for 30 years, well known in pastor circles. But he says it like this in his book, Practicing Resurrection. He says, we practice our death by giving up our will to live on our own terms. You used to be able to go and do whatever you want. But now you're going to be taken somewhere you do not want to go. He continues, only in that relinquishment, sorry if I could speak, only in that relinquishment or renunciation are we able to practice resurrection? And like so often in the Christian life, it is about the harder you clench and try to control and hold on, like the worse things tend to go. And the more you're willing to just let go, the more you live into this whole Jesus thing. But we give up our will to live our life on our own terms. Now, here's the problem, is a lot of people like me will stand up here and now start to fill in the blanks for you and tell you, well, here's what this means. But the reality is I don't know what it means for you. For some of you, it means you need to change jobs. For some of you, it means you need to stay in the job that you're in. For some of you, it means like you need to like love your neighbor. For some of you, it means like you need to put like a boundary between you and your neighbor because that's an unhealthy, toxic relationship. Like, I don't know. Right? We want like the real black and white, like give me the list, give me the check thing that I can like mark off and go and do, but I can't give you that. But here's what I know. I know that we come into this with like expectations. We come into this with a certain idea of what God's supposed to be about and do for us. And Eugene Peterson talks about our common reaction when we start living into the resurrection, and it takes us places where like, whoa, hold on. Not here. Surely not here. I remember there was a time in my life, I've shared this a ton, but where life took a left, and I'm like, really, God? I've done all the things. I'm like, send me, Lord. Like, I'm the one. I'm going to teach Bible, and I'm going to do all the things. And then all of a sudden, you let this happen? Surely not me, right? And yet, it's in those places where God is saying, hey, follow me here. Follow me in this. Eugene says, when we find that it all just feels a little bit normal, or it all just feels a little bit boring, or it all feels just a little bit hard, right? And please, like, tell me if this does not describe the American church. We want the exciting stuff, the flashy stuff, the stuff we can control and master and pat ourselves on the back about, compare ourselves to others with. We want to know and do more. We're not particularly interested in a life with God, but a life where we can gather facts about God and knowledge about God. We don't care to spend time in dependent prayer with God, but we'd rather go and do for God in the world as a force of good. And Peterson says there is a huge religious marketplace that has been set up in North America to meet the needs and fantasies of people just like us. There are conferences and gatherings custom designed to give you the lift that you need. There are books and videos, and this is written in like 2006. We could add TikTok videos and blog posts and seminars that promise to let us in on the Christian secret of whatever it is we feel is lacking in our life. Follow this plan for financial security. Follow this plan for well-behaved children. Follow this plan for weight loss, sex, travel to holy sites, exciting worship, celebrity teachers, fire up the fog machines and the lights, and let's do the thing. The people who promote these goods and services all smile a lot and are good looking. And then he says this, and this is the punch at the end of it, and they are obviously not bored. It's God packaged as a product. God depersonalized and made available as a technique or a program. What this means is that a resurrected Christ is not necessarily your own personal Jesus, to quote Depeche Mode. A resurrected Christ stands above all the things. And a resurrected Christ enters into all the things, even the boring things, the mundane things, and the screwed up things, and the dark things, and the dead things. And so much of this is expressed in our desire for some form of like sentimental Christianity where it just feels nice. It feels good. Something easy, right? Flannery O'Connor speaks to this, and she says this: we lost our innocence in the fall, and our return to it is through the redemption which was brought about by Christ's death and by our slow participation in it. Sentimentality is a skipping of this process and its concrete reality and an early arrival at a mock state of innocence, which strongly suggests its opposite. Right, so do you want an illustration of this? How many of y'all went to camp at some point in your life, in your younger life, and there was always like the decision night, right? And the lights were extra low and the music was extra like music-y, and the speaker brought his like, this is the one, this is the message that gets all the ladies in the yard or the boys in the yard or whatever it is. I think I'm mixing Fergie and youth pastors, I don't know. And you're like, I'm going to make a decision for Jesus. And you've had this moment. And right, I don't want to like poo-poo that in such a way that makes you think that's for some of you that have really actually encountered the risen Jesus in that moment, that all of that extra stuff somehow like crosses that out. No, it doesn't. But so often the story is we have some sort of experience in that moment, and then we spend the rest of our lives trying to get back to that place. Trying to get back to that mountain, back to that like, but I know I've tasted it here. I've experienced it here when I was like 22 and single in college and had like zero responsibilities, and I just prayed all the time. How do I get back there? I don't know, become a monk, quit your job? I don't know how you get back there. You had like 15 free hours a day. I don't know. But we somehow miss that Jesus Christ is meeting you right here and right now. In your distraction, in your busyness, in your responsibility, in your tests, and in your commutes, and in all the stuff. Jesus does not promise to encounter us somewhere out there. The risen Jesus is here. In your real life. Not in the life you wish you had, or the one you think you should have, or the one you hope you one day will live into. This one. And so your glorifying God, like Peter's glorifying God, is not going to become and you're like, man, I'm going to finally get my act together. I'm going to pray really hard, and then God will be so glorified. Your glorifying of God is going to come like Peter's in weakness and limitation. When God takes like the worst of the bunch, right? The only worst choice to lead the church was Judas, right? And Judas is gone at this point in the story. R.I.P. He looks at like the failure of all the disciples and is like, you go feed my sheep. Because resurrection happens where dead things are. Not where strong things are. Not where victorious things are. And so what are the things that you're like, man, this part of my life, this is the part of my life that God could never do anything with? That's probably exactly the place where God's trying to meet you. Bonhoeffer wrote once that the church in Germany, Bonhoeffer was a theologian during the rise of Nazism, but catch me if you've heard this one before. Bonhoeffer writes that the church in Germany failed to see the evil of Nazism because they failed to enter into suffering and pain. That all of life and all of faith was about pleasure. And so at the rise of Nazism came with it material success, power, pleasure, and they thought, surely this is of God, because look at how much success we're having. And so many Christians in Germany hitched their wagon, the church in Germany hitched its wagon to Nazism. Bonhoeffer goes on to say their lives became about living as free as possible from any form of suffering. God forbid. And in that pursuit, they lost their ability to live as Christians. To live truthful lives, to live resurrected lives. And when he had said this, Jesus said to him, follow me, because now you're ready for it. If we put the follow me at the front, we miss everything that's come before this. As much as we want to push against it, there's a notion that life will one day be nirvana for us, but like, let's just get rid of those expectations. Some of y'all are like, nope, we're good. I know life is not going to be nirvana. But that then means following Jesus is not following Jesus in some life that will one day happen. It's following Jesus right here and right now, even in this land. And we give witness to the goodness of life, and we bear witness to life over death, and we bear witness to connectedness and to goodness and to beauty and to preciousness of every square corner of life that God is redeeming. This is what it looks like for us to live, to practice resurrection, to follow Jesus here and now. And so life is not merely some sort of biological reality where like your brain is doing its thing and your lungs are doing their thing, but living, true living, is connection to the divine, the creator, the maker and sustainer of all living things. In him, we live and move and have our being. In short, life is right here in the following. Even when it feels like a disaster, even when it feels painful and hard and difficult, real life is lived in the following. And I want to end with this. It's sort of where we began. Resurrection is not your work. And so I don't want it to get twisted here. Following doesn't change what God has done. You following Jesus can sound like it's somehow putting the onus on you, but following is simply our living into the truth of things. Our living into the reality that Jesus has actually risen instead of living into the reality as if he hadn't. Our following doesn't change what God has done. It doesn't somehow add to Jesus' death. It doesn't make him rise again from the dead. It doesn't give us the Spirit of Jesus Christ. Our following simply means we live in congruence with the fact that Jesus has died for the sins of the world, that Jesus has been risen from the dead, and that God's Spirit has been poured out into the earth. It means that we live out our baptism. It means that we actually come back to the reality that when we came out of those waters, we came out as a new creature in Christ. And we're invited to now show up on Monday morning, wherever your Monday morning has you, as that creature. To participate in that, to live that, and in so doing, to bear witness to the resurrection of Jesus. Peter and the other disciples had encountered resurrection. They had seen it, they had touched it, they had experienced it. It had happened, and yet life was the same as it was before. Back to fishing. What else could they do? But then Jesus says, "Follow me." And this is an invitation not to do the work of God, but to live into the work that God has done. And so I want to encourage you, Redemption Church, that the risen Christ meets you in your ordinary life, fully reconciling you and inviting you to lose yourself in love of him. And I know that that will look 1,000 different ways in each of your lives. But for all of us, we are to go with him wherever he leads us. And that means even here and now. The risen Jesus is inviting you to follow him into a resurrection life, right where you are.
Thanks for listening. If you found this sermon helpful, we encourage you to share it with a friend. This space of exploration and hope is for absolutely anyone. Now go out today in the love of the Father, and by his Spirit embody the hope of Jesus to the world around you.